All right, welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission. This is Thursday, January 15th, 2026, and we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And everyone is present, and tonight from City Council, we have Andy Fury. Thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry you have the third screen.
We appreciate it. All right. Agenda changes. Some of you may notice that the agenda changed a little bit today for timing and because we will have a different meeting on this same subject that our consultants are going to present upon tonight. So February 4th, we'll have more robust public comment, but tonight we will have a question and answer period with them. So now we'll move on to the December 18th, 2025 minutes. Approval of those. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the December 18th, 2025 minutes. All of those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. So those who were here agree. We have 3 members here who were present at that meeting, so we'll go ahead and approve those. All right. And now we'll take communications from the public. Since we did do a slight agenda change, anyone who has anything to say tonight regarding the Planning Commission, any part of what we're doing here, or anything in the city of Whitefish, please come forward, state your name at the podium, and speak directly into the microphone. We are broadcasting out, and it'll be on YouTube later for the public to see, so speak clearly and let us know your thoughts.
Could you first just clarify what the agenda change is so we can speak to it if we need to?
Yes, so the previous agenda that was posted had a public comment and a direction of our commission to the staff regarding the presentation, but since we don't have the land use element written or in front of us at all, it's going to be very difficult for us to direct staff on something that we haven't seen. So we're not going to give any direction on what the consultants say. We're going to say thank you to them. But if anyone from the public has questions, that'll be the time to do it. And then now is public comment. So if you have something to comment on, then you can do it at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Chris Schustrom. I'm the chair of the Heart of Whitefish and a founding board member of the Heart of Whitefish organization. Appreciate the opportunity to comment this evening. The mission of the Heart of Whitefish is to help ensure the economic vitality of downtown Whitefish through advocacy for sound planning. The Heart of Whitefish was founded in 2003 to create a downtown master plan, and we were successful in that with a partnership with the city of Whitefish. I trust that you've received the letter submitted on our behalf by Crandall Arambula. We have retained Crandall Arambula to provide expertise on the elements of the growth policy that have the potential to have an economic impact on the economic vitality of downtown Whitefish. Crandall Arambula has 28 years of experience in revitalizing downtowns and planning successful retail in cities across the country. This includes our downtown business district master plan and subsequent work in Whitefish over the past 23 years. These are our issues and concerns with the growth policy and the land use planning, a number of different elements. The need for more neighborhood housing is well supported by state-mandated MLUPA policies and housing needs assessment data. However, no growth policy rationale nor data has been provided to justify the need for retail use in residential place types. Permitting additional neighborhood retail businesses will exacerbate the downtown vacancy condition, weakening the downtown business district as a destination for local and visitor shoppings, and in turn, reducing resort tax revenues. There are currently approximately 89,000 vacant parcels and vacant retail spaces in downtown Whitefish. That's included in the letter as well. We propose the following actions. We request that the economic development, land use, and housing elements do not include mixed neighborhood or neighborhood center policies promoting retail use, nor zoning updates that include permitted retail use outside the downtown business district or other town areas where retail is currently permitted by right or conditionally. The place types could be replaced with a residential mixed income place type with a variety of different housing options. We also request that in the downtown or in the growth policy, we provide downtown retail preservation policies and regulations, and also the build out of a robust town-wide active transportation network by 2045. These plans are all included and have been sitting on a shelf since the adoption of the Connect Whitefish, the Pedestrian Bicycle Master Plan, and the Transportation Plan. These points are all expanded upon in the letter that Crandall Arambula submitted to you as well. In addition, not only were 2 mixed neighborhood areas and 1 neighborhood center area promoted or proposed by the planners on their boards last night. But in looking more closely at it, there are a total of 5 mixed neighborhood areas that would allow retail in the Highway 93 corridor south. And that's really troubling and very alarming. So we hope you'll take a closer look at that map. And thanks again for the opportunity to comment and be a part of the process.
Thank you, Chris. Further public comment generally? Thank you.
Hey, Nathan Dugan, 937 Kalispell Avenue. As you guys are considering that letter and today and in the future, maybe some food for thought about what the consultants say about themselves. We walk the talk. Crandall, Arambula, staff members are all committed urbanists who are actively involved in civic activities and advocate for initiatives that address climate change and reduce our carbon footprint through land use and transportation strategies that we offer to each of our clients. Most notably, all members of our staff are fortunate enough to live within walkable mixed-use districts or neighborhoods. All staff members commute to work via transit, walking, or by bicycle. We heard a lot about the carbon footprint stuff and things, I think, from the high schoolers that spoke earlier. They say fortunate, which I guess, you know, that part might track. If you're fortunate to live within a half a mile of downtown Whitefish like I am, you know, then I guess you get to live in a walkable mixed-use district in this community, but otherwise, maybe not. I think that the things that are argued for in that letter clash with what the consultants say about themselves, and I think that should raise a question in your head. What are their principles? Do they simply put on paper what they're getting paid to say? I think that is a problem as you kind of consider that letter. And I think the one thing that is mischaracterized as well, I haven't heard anybody advocate for retail in neighborhoods. Neighborhood commercial, sure. From my perspective, if you guys want to outright ban retail in neighborhood commercial, go for it. Nobody wants like a Gucci store in their neighborhood or whatever else. People are thinking about coffee shops, things like that. They're not thinking about retail in neighborhoods. I don't know how neighborhood commercial has turned into retail in neighborhoods, but that's not the discussion that I saw happen multiple times last year. And I don't think it's a discussion that anybody's having. Thanks.
Thank you, Nathan.
Giuseppe Caltabiano, 2075 Lion Mountain Loop Road, Whitefish. Good evening, commissioners. I'm speaking tonight as a citizen of Whitefish, although one who also happened to have some experience serving on city council. I'd like to be very clear, Public participation to this process is essential, and organizations like the Heart of Whitefish or Shelter Whitefish have every right to share their views. That's not the issue. The issue is process. A growth policy is not an advocacy document. It is a community-wide framework developed through years of public input, staff expertise, and a consultant selected through a public RFP process to balance competing interests, not to advance any single one. When a privately retained consultant submits a parallel land use framework, even under the label of public comment, it risks blurring the line between participation and authorship. Most residents engage by attending meetings, filling out surveys, or writing letters, not by hiring professional planning firms. That imbalance matters. Expertise is valuable, but accountability matters more. The city's consultant is accountable to the public as a whole. A private consultant is accountable to a client and a specific outcome. I would respectfully urge the Commission to treat this submission strictly as advocacy input, one perspective out of many, and to reaffirm that the city's consultant-led draft remains the sole working document guiding this process. Protecting the integrity of the process is how we ensure the final plan reflects all of Whitefish, not just the best resourced voices. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Further public comment?
Hello, Keegan Siebenaller, 306 Lutfer Avenue, speaking tonight as the Executive Director of Shelter WF and also talking about this letter that was delivered to you. I want to introduce another term to the public record tonight, and that's regulatory capture. So regulatory capture occurs when a government agency created to serve the public interest instead advances the commercial, ideological, or political goals of the special interest group or industry that it's supposed to regulate. I was struck in the public comment that Heart of Whitefish said that the potential for viable businesses in other neighborhoods would exacerbate the vacancy problem downtown. And that really struck me because what they're saying is that the potential for this mixed-use commercial in other parts of the city is inherently viable, and the businesses want it more than they would take up a vacant storefront downtown. I think that's particularly interesting because these same people have been saying that there's no way that this mixed-use commercial would ever be viable. At the same time, they're saying all these businesses will go there instead of going to the downtown. So I guess I'm asking which of those two scenarios it is. And if downtown storefronts are sitting vacant and local serving businesses are decamping for other parts of the city, I think that's more a problem with the current structure of the downtown and its plan and its association than it is a problem for the city to solve in a way that I think would truly be regulatory capture. It's not the city's job to protect certain interests over other interests. I also want to agree with Giuseppe that I think a letter by consultants hired by a private group is going to reflect what that private group wants. That's the implicit promise when you're retaining their services. So yeah, just those few comments. I think the public process is really important. Shelter WF has many things that we want the city council and the planning commission to make different decisions on. And we try to give you the best evidence we can to convince you to our side. I think everybody should operate on that same standard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Keegan. Further public comment?
Hi, I'm Paul McCann, 340 Summers Avenue. I just want to make a comment. I went to the presentation last night, and I was impressed by how organized it was, and I thought the big posters and answered a lot of questions for me, and I was really encouraged by that. And I asked questions of staff, and they were very helpful. And I just want to compliment that whole process. It was very good. But there's one thing that didn't really address that's always been kind of maybe it's just an obvious thing, but the traffic coming into Whitefish, once you get to 13th Street, it gets pretty rigorous, especially during, school hours, getting out, the ski hill getting out, and in the summer at times. And I think that should be a consideration of where you're putting future development and so forth, that maybe south of 13th Street would be a better location than north, just because of that traffic issue and that, that bottleneck on 2nd Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Further public comment come forward?
Hi, Karen Hilding, 1016 Creekview Drive. I was actually here to listen to the high school kids. I guess I missed them, but oh well. But I was going to say, it's a little unfortunate because I actually agree with everyone that spoke. The problem I see is I live in a neighborhood where I can walk easily downtown and get a cup of coffee. Not everyone is that fortunate. If you're on the other side of the tracks, if you're in some neighborhoods, it's pretty hard to walk all the way downtown and get a cup of coffee. So I believe in walkable communities, and if someone builds a new development and wants to have a coffee shop in there, then they are able to walk also, like I am, to a coffee shop. So I think it's a little bit difficult because, we do want a strong downtown, obviously. We've made our town walkable for a certain amount of people that live within a certain radius of that downtown. But our town is kind of spread out, with the Wisconsin Avenue is spread out to the north, it's spread out to the west, now it's spreading out towards the wastewater treatment plant, but I think we want to allow those same opportunities that I'm lucky enough to have to other people. So, and eventually we're going to go beyond cars, and I don't know how we're going to travel then. But in the meantime, I think part of the thing that people dislike about our downtown is all the traffic. And we're always going to have Highway 93 bisecting our downtown. We can't avoid that. And so that makes, other parts of our town more desirable in some ways. So, in any case, thanks a lot. People wonder if I miss work. No, I don't miss working at the city. Sorry, but no, not really. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Good evening, Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 137 South Main in Kalispell. I was surprised when I looked at the posters. I was not able to attend last night because I was at a county meeting, which is equally important to Whitefish, looking at lakeshore protection rules in county, in all the lakes in the county. And it was a really good discussion. There was a lot of exchange of ideas. It was one of those meetings that you go, gosh, government can work, and I come to this meeting and I go, gosh, there's so much contention, and I'm concerned that we're coming to a process where it's dots on a poster that's going to determine the future of Whitefish. And I just don't feel like we're having, and a lot of it's the legislature, the pressure they're putting on us as a community, Whitefish as a community, to do this under a super tight deadline. But there's not the kind of robust discussion where the public is really being engaged and understanding what's going on. I don't know exactly what the solution is right now, but I think one possibility is the city ought to be going to the state and saying, we are doing a really difficult job. We're working incredibly hard. We need more time. That seems like a very reasonable thing, whether or not it will be allowed, but I think we ought to at least be asking that question. I think the issue of what is commercial, what is retail is really blurred, and I don't think that the public really understands what's being suggested. Are we talking about a coffee house? Are we talking about a dispensary? Are we talking about, what is going to be the scope of these neighborhood proposed uses? The fact that Heart of Whitefish is being accused of bringing a private group in to make a comment. This is a group the city retained and worked with for their downtown master plan. They've commented on transportation plans, I believe. They've been an active voice in this community. And as an organization, I look to other planners and other groups to get ideas myself before I bring them to you. We're looking for something that fits for Whitefish. And I think to dismiss or discredit the information that you got from tonight from Heart of Whitefish is a disservice to this whole community. It deserves to be, as a professional opinion, considered with great weight going forward. And I'm really disappointed that we can't have a pause somehow and figure out how to do this more respectfully, more with ability to go back and forth with questions. Maybe that's what last night was supposed to be about. But it's a really, really tight schedule for the scope of changes that are being proposed for this community by those wanting to see much heavier density, much more commercial, retail, neighborhood, whatever. It's not defined clearly, but I don't know other than to just say, I'm frustrated. I'd like to find more of a win-win situation that we can have going forward. And I'd like to see some discussion on that at the City Council on Monday, Andy, if that's possible, because I think we're in a really divisive mindset in this community right now, and it's not constructive, and it's not helpful to this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Hello, everyone, and thanks again for the opportunity to speak. I was not planning to speak tonight, so forgive me, I'm going to be a little bit all over the page.
Can you state your name and
Sorry,
address
Jamie
before you start?
Gogan.
Thank you.
Yes, Jamie Gogan, 117 Washington Avenue. I would just like to start off by saying, I think it was today that Saks Fifth Avenue has filed for bankruptcy. Saks Fifth Avenue purchased Neiman Marcus, which had filed for bankruptcy. Remember those big businesses from, I don't know, big cities? They, I know them from my childhood. They seemed like legacy brands that could never go away. I guess I'm saying that because there's a real shift in the way that people purchase goods and services, specifically physical goods. They're buying things online. I want to be very cognizant about how we explain why there might be vacancies on Central Avenue. There's not necessarily competing retail in Whitefish that is taking away from downtown. I think that retail as a sector is experiencing a tremendous shift. And so I think I wanted to put that into context. You know, and with all due respect to every neighbor here, really, we do see things a little differently, even though we have a lot to agree with. You know, I have a dream for this town. I have a dream for this plot of land, this 26 acres that sits along the river. south of town on the 93. And I think it would be a perfect place for retail, mixed use. And I'm not talking Gucci. I'm not talking about anything other than the types of things that we would use on the regular basis, things that would enhance our lifestyle, and coffee definitely enhances my lifestyle. But you got to get your hair cut, barbershop, childcare, perhaps isn't exactly retail, but you know, even sundries, small electronic goods. It would be so nice not to have to drive to Kalispell if I needed a phone charger or whatnot. And I think we should be very discerning and upfront about what type of retail we would expect in these neighborhoods. And the concept of a polycentric community doesn't have to take away from the downtown core. And when I speak on mixed use, I'm mostly thinking about new development versus existing development. I'm not suggesting we should turn the avenues into a retail hub or whatever. A polycentric community can have lifestyle, high quality lifestyle for those neighborhood members. And then downtown is where we convene. It's where we go to be together. It's where we go to experience ourselves in the community and grow, and that's where all the living happens. And so I love the idea of downtown being the main hub in our community for that. But I want to be very clear that we should define retail and then take into consideration the fact that a lot of our community would enjoy these types of services within a walking distance from their home, and that would also lead to less traffic on our already super congested roads. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie. Further public comment?
Good evening. Can you hear me? I haven't been able to hear most of the commenters. I'll try to be loud enough. Rhonda Fitzgerald, Lupfer Avenue. At the University of Montana is the Bureau for Business and Economic Research. And they, every year, do an economic report. They go around the state and they hold seminars in every big city. So it's Kalispell for us. But every year they do that, and they're in February. And so they send out a little blurb to entice you to sign up for this day-long seminar on the most recent economic trends, because that's what they live and die for, is studying that. So they put their blurb out yesterday, and I thought you guys would be very interested. The headline is, Montana ranks #1 for wage growth, despite slower economic growth. So I thought, I think I need to read that. Montana's economy continues to decelerate from its pandemic era surge. Overall growth is slowing, but average incomes are rising. In fact, Montana ranked #1 in the nation for average wage growth in 2025. So that fits with some of the other data that I've seen in Whitefish. Wages have risen in the last 5 years 40%. But unfortunately, housing prices have tripled, and so that doesn't do much to close that gap. But the idea that we have low wages in Whitefish is actually not correct, and the wages are also increasing, and all the employers in town can tell you that, because it's expensive to have employees. So that's something that I think needs to be considered in all of the deliberations. They also say, while pay is increasing, the number of jobs is not. In June 2025, Montana is one of 18 states that saw a decrease in total employment over the previous 12 months. Total employment has been flat since summer of 2024 due to limited labor force and significant slowdown in population growth. So these are important things when we're talking about a 20-year trajectory. Because most of the numbers you're dealing with are several years old now and were extrapolated from the peak of the COVID disruption. So I'm just hoping, as I say probably in every public meeting, that you go back, revisit the data, bring it up to date, and then do your projections of population and your projection for your housing needs based on reality instead of a guess from 2022. The population projections and associated housing needs projections must be brought up to date before the growth policy is finalized, because otherwise it will lay the foundation for drastic changes that could irrevocably damage this community. Once you give it, you can't take it away. So just be cognizant that planning for extravagant growth, hyperinflated, will lay the groundwork for things that I think most people who live in Whitefish don't want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Any further public comment? All right. And we don't have the option of online, so what we have is what we have. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment section. That was our general public comment. And we'll move on in our agenda to, I'm sure the reason everyone's here, our consultants, CZB. They have a presentation. Some of you may have been able to join the open house last night to see a preview of this, and then they'll present some of that to us. Jot down your questions, hold them to the end. We'll have a brief question and answer period. They've agreed to that at the end of their presentation. So if you do have a question once this presentation is over, you can come up to the mic and they'll just stand close by and answer. So it will not be a back and forth with the consultants. It will just be asking a question. They might be able to reference a slide if you have a question about something in particular, and then we'll move on to the next question. Past that, we'll meet again on February 4th. So kind of keep that in mind. If you have something that doesn't get hashed out or answered tonight, this is not the end. All right. You guys are welcome to come up and present. Thanks for being here.
So, thank you for having us back. We're very excited to be here. My name is Thomas Eddington with CZB. Can you guys hear me okay? Is this good? Okay.
Let me make sure in the back that he can hear you because, yes, he says yes. Go ahead. Okay. Okay.
I'll try to stay closer. Is that better?
Yes, and just project your voice as much as possible for the audience members as well who are here. Thank you.
Sure. So, again, thank you so much for having us here. We're excited to be back and present kind of our draft outline for the land use plan. So as was noted, we had good community input last night. What we'll walk through tonight is a bit of an overview and a bit of a synopsis of what we presented last night. So as you can see here, this is the project timeline. This is where we are in January. We're getting near our final delivery of a draft product to you at the end of this month for your February meeting. You can go to the next slide, Alan. Again, this is the land use element that is a part of the overall growth policy and is a significant component of what MLUPA requires is included in your growth policy, essentially addressing land use over the next 20 years. By way of a little bit of background, you guys are probably familiar with some of the engagement we've had to date. It started really for us. There were prior rounds of engagement before us joining the community's growth plan, growth policy endeavor. Back in September, we did an in-person community outreach that was followed up in October with an online version. At that time, we were really asking the community generally, what what areas do you think are potentially likely to change and or unlikely to change in the community in terms of land use and specific geographies? We received input with regard to that. We came back in November and had an in-person open house that was followed by a December online version where we presented some general growth policy ideology, objectives, general goals, kind of general planning questions, as well as some questions with regard to specific areas that could be developed within the community, and maybe some of those areas down the line that could be annexation, voluntary annexation areas out of the city. We asked for some prioritization. We received that community that input. We also had presented the concept of place types in terms of how to think about growing into the future. We received that input and then came back in January. Last night was really kind of a presentation of the overall outline for the land use plan, as well as a request for input regarding land use recommendations. Generally, what we heard is the community is interested in strong walkable communities. They're interested in the preservation of neighborhood character. Keep in mind, character is unique to a neighborhood. It's unique to a place. It's not just a single definition of character for the community. We heard a lot with regard to the importance of workforce housing, as well as connecting infrastructure and preservation of the environment. All part of what we heard from the community relative to the future land use desires. So what we thought we'd do tonight is kind of walk you through what we presented last night so that you see what we presented to the community, as well as kind of the framework for a land use plan. So in terms of current trends and influences, the MLUPA legislation requires that we coordinate and base population estimates off of the Montana Department of Commerce. So you can see there on the right-hand portion of the slide a graph that represents DOC's population projections. Part of the overall framework for the growth policy is an estimate that growth over the course of the next 20 years will likely be about 3,000 to 5,000 people. That's generally in line with what DOC says. You can go to the next slide. That also ties into the housing projections pursuant to DOC. They estimate that the need is about 2,100 units over the course of the next 20 years. You all did a housing assessment study in 2025 that looked out, the horizon was about 10 years, and that estimated about 1,100 units. If you carry that out another 10 years, it's at about 2,100 units. So the housing assessment as well as DOC are generally tracking in terms of numbers estimated. And so it was also important to us to look at the housing assessment in terms of the kind of housing that was needed. And based on their input in the assessment, it noted that about almost 3/4 of the need for housing is really in terms of workforce housing, affordable housing needs. And so if you carry that forward to a 20-year horizon, that would say that out of the 2,100 units anticipated needed over the course of the next 20 years, about 1,600 of those units would fall into the workforce and affordable housing category. Go to the next one. So as we get into a land use plan, it's important to understand what a land use plan can and cannot do. And so it certainly can guide development. It can start to help you define where residential land uses should be relative to where commercial land uses should be, where you should mix land uses, where industrial and economic opportunities lie, laying out those kinds of districts, if you will. It can promote sustainability, ensuring that you protect wetlands and environmentally sensitive lands, ensuring that you protect the edges. It can enhance the quality of life. It can help ensure walkable communities, amenitized communities, parks, etc. It can help minimize land use conflicts, ensuring that, say, industrial lands aren't located directly adjacent to residential lands, ensuring that buffers are provided, etc. And it can certainly support economic development by ensuring that you have the right geographies designated for commercial and business development. All of that can be done by way of a land use plan. So what a land use plan cannot do is control the market forces. It cannot dictate real estate demand. It cannot dictate what the market does. It can't control interest rates or anything like that. It is simply a framework for growth for the community, but it is dependent upon the market. It cannot guarantee development, so just because you designate an area, a certain place type, or subsequently a zoning district, does not necessarily mean that that development will take place. That's dependent upon, again, market forces and property owners' discretion. It cannot predict the future accurately every time, and so it's important to recognize that over the course of a 20-year horizon, there may be a need to pivot, and typically we recommend that as you deal with your future land use plan or even your growth policy in general, make sure that you take the time to analyze it at the end of a given year or every other year so that you recognize where change is necessary and or where you need to pivot. It cannot enforce regulations. It is a non-binding document. Your binding documents lie within your zoning ordinance and with your building permits. And then finally, it cannot ensure community consensus. So, as much as we have tried to reach out to the community, you all have reached out to the community, we have tried to make sure that that everyone has been heard, that we have incorporated what we have heard by all of the community, but we do recognize that ensuring 100% community consensus across the board is virtually impossible in any document. So that is unfortunately one of the things it cannot do. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we've outlined some goals for the land use plan. One is to focus growth inward. Generally, where the opportunities exist, we should grow within the city boundaries. We should look at infill development and look at some of those large lots that could be reimagined for future neighborhoods, perhaps more densely developed than in the past. But these are undeveloped areas that we're looking at. Provide housing opportunities and affordability. We have heard throughout this process the importance of workforce and affordable housing. A housing ladder, if you will, for the future of this community that is recommended and promoted within this land use plan. Preservation of the community character and quality of life, ensuring that the community that you've built is carried on into the future. Again, that depends on different neighborhoods have a different character, and capitalizing upon those unique geographies is an important component of this plan. Ensuring environmental stewardship and climate readiness, protecting the environmental resources that are a part of the community, protecting the rural community character that surrounds the community is important, as well as ensuring that the built pattern within the community is capitalized upon and carried forward. And then supporting a resilient and local economy. This kind of ties into both the economy as well as housing. So making sure that we have the right kind of housing to ensure the workforce is available to fill and maintain the positions that support this economy is an important component of the land use plan. So as part as a growth framework, a growth and development framework, we've kind of divided the plan into three components. One is place-based growth, which is essentially capitalizing upon the attributes, the character, the built pattern, the form, the built fabric of the existing community, of those neighborhoods, and carrying that forward. Preserving that character, capitalizing on that character, looking at existing conditions. The second is to protect and transition the community boundaries. So one of the goals of the land use plan is to focus growth inward, but there is a recognition that down the road, over the course of 20 years, there may be the need to look at voluntary annexation and to look at how to prioritize those annexations and to ensure that that growth would relate to the existing adjacent neighbors in those areas. That's an important part of this plan, as is the preservation and capitalization upon the local character. We've heard that a number of times. That character again, varies throughout the community by neighborhood, neighborhood by neighborhood. It's important that the land use plan recognize that zoning alone, zoning classifications, district zoning won't get you exactly where you want to be in terms of capitalization upon that character, but recognizing that development standards, et cetera, incorporated into the code will start to get you there. So, if you think about that kind of character, our recommendation has been that we think about the community in terms of place types, which are essentially a description of the character, the form, and the function of an area. It's somewhat an assessment of existing conditions as well as aspirational conditions. What are our places like? How do they function? What do they feel like? What is their character? And so if you take a look on the right side of the slide, you'll see that we've defined a set of place types for the community. We have mapped those. Those have been presented to the community. Alan, you can go to the next slide. I won't assume that you can read anything on these slides. These have been presented to the community. We can go through these in detail. We can put them at the end of the presentation if you want to go through them. But these were presented to the community as place types for the community. These are just for visual imagery for you to understand that we have a number of them proposed. If you go back to the first one, though, just real quickly, I know that we've heard a little bit about mixed use and commercial development. It's important for us to make sure that we convey to you that we are not recommending as part of this land use plan that existing neighborhoods incorporate commercial or mixed use development. The mixed use development component as part of the place type designation is really for only two designations. One is neighborhood center and the other is mixed neighborhood. Those place type designations are only mapped in areas that are large vacant lots within the community, and I'll show you those in just a second, but not for existing built out neighborhoods. Those are for new neighborhoods to provide for some of those daily services that a newer, denser neighborhood on a large lot, more than 10 acres of total development area, where they might benefit from some of those, maybe a restaurant, maybe a cafe, maybe a coffee shop, could be a bike shop, a bike repair shop. Those kinds of things are what is recommended, but not for existing neighborhoods. That's important for us to make sure that we convey that. You can go to the next one, Alan. So again, we can come back to these, but these have been presented to the community in both of the two most recent open houses. Next one. That was the final one. And this was the map. We also don't expect you to be able to see this map, but we do have this divided into thirds at the end of the presentation if you did want to go back and look at it. But this is a map that's also been presented a couple of times to the community and been tweaked a little bit as a result of that, as a result of those presentations. Again, this future place type map really provides the foundational framework upon which the recommended future zoning map would be built upon. Place types, keep in mind, can incorporate one or two or three specific zoning designations. They're a character description, not a specific zoning use district designation. Okay, so then we've got some recommendations contained within the land use plan. All three of these on this page really relate to the zoning ordinance and are generally in compliance with MLUPA. So a recommendation for the zoning ordinance update, I think you guys are getting ready to pursue at least a zoning ordinance fix very quickly. So you're actually underway there. Updating the zoning map to match the place type map. That would probably be a component of the general initial fix to the zoning ordinance that's being proposed, I think before May, as I understand. And then the other component is MLOOP. It no longer allows for an architecture review committee an architecture review commission to actually review design and development standards. And so with the removal of the ARC, our recommendation would be that you take some of those, you take a look at the architecture review, architectural design standards and development standards, and consider incorporating some of those into the ordinance. And I know that MLUPA is pretty specific with regard to what can come in. It has to benefit, or it has to relate to health and safety. We think that that is important to, again, get those into the code so that you don't go without them, because the community has depended upon them for so many years in the past. It'll just be a different format. It'll be inside City Hall rather than within the ARC. If you go to the next one, also in line with MLUPA is look at the refining the conditional use allowances by zoning district. Right now, your conditional use permits are subject to public input and planning commission review, of course. MLUPA is changing the way that that will be, that CUPs will be addressed. And so our recommendation is incorporate as permitted uses with standards where you can in the code. But if there are conditional uses, include conditional criteria within the ordinance, within the zoning ordinance, and make those administrative. So at least they're specific uses that you think could cause negative impacts are being reviewed in a little bit more detail with conditions. Protecting the scale and character of downtown. So as part of MLUPA and Senate Bill 243, you're required to allow for 60-foot heights in the downtown. And so I know that we have heard a significant concern about that kind of scale in the downtown. So our recommendation would be to, start looking at this in the zoning ordinance as potentially, is it 60 feet with a maximum of 4 stories? So maybe you can start to ensure compatibility with the existing built fabric downtown. Maybe there's an opportunity to look at floor plates, floor area ratio, maybe step backs or setbacks for the building to ensure that if you have a taller building, that they do start to relate to the existing character of the downtown. Maybe look at sub-districts for downtown. Maybe there are areas that are 60 feet. Maybe there are some areas that are a little bit lower so that you can protect some of the important resources. And then maybe look at some of the ways that we can use uses to perhaps mitigate the impact of a 60-foot building. Maybe there are some uses that can't go to 60 feet, maybe short-term rentals, things like that. So there are some ways to start to mitigate it. MLUPA does require it, but there may be some avenues to begin to mitigate it, and we think that's worth looking at. If you go to the next one. So kind of also in line with that, Senate Bill 243 also noted that 60-foot height allowances are allowed in downtown, heavy commercial, and industrial districts. And so if you think about Highway 93, maybe the strategy would be to consider a redesignation of that zoning district as maybe something like suburban light corridor, so that you would not be required to consider a 60-foot wall of buildings up 93. Maybe there's a way to think about that as light commercial in line with MLUPA that says heavy commercial districts have to allow 60-foot buildings. So there's probably a way to strategically think about how we have pockets of maybe taller buildings on 93, maybe in those nodes that we've talked about, but not all the way along 93, which would significantly change that character. And then we are recommending a look at character-based standards for the heritage neighborhood place types, which include the avenues area and the area immediately surrounding the downtown. Maybe looking at reducing the building height allowed there to ensure that some of those smaller houses are protected and that the development in that community doesn't change too drastically. Maybe limiting building footprint expansion in that area, and maybe reducing lot size increases in that area so that you don't get new development that's incompatible with existing development. Again, these are recommendations that move from land use planning into zoning ordinance. We talked a little bit about that large lot development, recommending that growth inward. So it was in our November meeting that we asked for community input with regard to 3 areas in particular, A, B, and C up there. You can see those areas. We asked for recommendations in terms of which areas do you think should be prioritized for growth. All of these areas are currently vacant. The community was generally supportive of development in these areas, and the recommended place types for these areas were the mixed development for A and B on the west side of 93, and for C, which is the mall considering redevelopment, and the area north of the mall, the old hospital site, was recommended for neighborhood centers. So these 3 areas would be newly developed areas, newly developed neighborhoods that could incorporate some mixed use. That was the recommendation from the community. And then looking out into the future, we discussed the annexation opportunities. The community was generally supportive of growing inward first, seeing how that goes over the next number of years, and if there's a need to grow outward, prioritizing that development and looking at voluntary annexations that would meet certain criteria, providing transportation connections that are important to the community, that would connect critical infrastructure that's also important to the community, and then also that would include dedicated workforce housing. So as we think about growing outward, after we look at the infill opportunities, ensuring that those criteria are a part of those annexations should be considered. I think, excuse me, the last one is collaborating closely with your neighboring jurisdictions. This is certainly with Flathead County, with Columbia Falls, and Kalispell. The opportunities to approach some of the shared concerns and the shared challenges, whether that's housing, whether that's transportation, environmental protection, agricultural and rural protections, is important and can probably best be done if you do this collaboratively. Certainly, we understand the challenges associated with collaboration, political jurisdictions, boundaries, etc. But most everybody we heard from noted that they didn't want, to see everything meshed together. They wanted to see division. They didn't want to see suburban sprawl along all of the corridors where there might be no differentiation between the three jurisdictions. And so collaborating is an opportunity to start to get there. And I think that was the last recommendation. We're certainly available for discussion. My colleagues Lauren and Matt are here as well, and or questions. We are wide open.
All right, so first, I think just for ease and clarity, we'll do questions from the commission, and then we'll turn over for questions from the public for them. So any commissioners, do you have questions for Thomas or the other consultants? We may have had them all answered last night and over the last months. All right. So we will turn to the public. If you just want to stay
I'll
very
stay up here,
close
sure.
by, and
Sure.
then whoever would like to ask a question, come to the mic and ask it, and they'll answer for you. And there may be none. That was such a great presentation. There are no questions. No. Richard, go. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems to me, Richard Hildner, Whitefish, there is a bit of a conundrum around use by right. And I don't know how that will be addressed, both in land use and in zoning. And if there's any clarity that can come with that now, or do we have to wait? Huh?
So with regard to MLUPA, and we agree with this generally as a planning principle, the idea of having by right allowances is the right way to go. We typically recommend moving to a by right code, but also adding the development standards, ensuring the protection of the existing built fabric is incorporated into that zoning ordinance. So I think that's a recommendation of MLUPA, and we would recommend that that be incorporated into the zoning code. As we did note in the presentation, there will likely be uses that you perhaps want to remain conditional uses. They won't be at the Planning Commission in terms of kind of that public face, if you will, but they could be they could be administrative conditional use permits with specific conditions incorporated into the zoning ordinance. So that would be our recommendation. But MLUPA is requiring that you move to a by right code.
Yeah, just super brief question. I think we all can agree that those large lot developments in the city limits that are currently not developed are like some of the most ripe opportunities for redevelopment. I guess the concern I have is basically when we're picking a few zones, if those particular developers or whoever owns those properties doesn't want to redevelop them, there goes like kind of a large part of the strategy over the next 20 years. Could you talk a little bit about, in the land use plan, how much of the redevelopment or new development is focused on those areas versus what in your recommendations is focused on redevelopment and kind of densification of existing neighborhoods?
So we're noting in the plan that those large lot areas are a primary focus for opportunities for future development within the community. We also recognize that if those property owners don't want to develop those properties, that then there is a recommendation to consider and prioritize voluntary annexation outside of the community. As part of the place type mapping, we also included a transitional zone that was actually included in the map last night. Public input was pretty supportive of when development takes place within the community. When that is complete, then definitely move out into the transitional zone, prioritize and coordinate that development. Our thinking right now is if internal development on those large lots doesn't take place within 3 to 5 years, and then certainly you start to look outside of the community. I know that there's some interest by those property owners to develop, and so hopefully that will take place first, but if not, then there are areas within the transitional zone just outside of the city boundary where recommended growth is outlined in the plan. I would also note that it's not just on the large lot areas that we're recommending development. There certainly is infill development on vacant lots, et cetera. We do know that's harder, and it doesn't make as much of a dent, but it is strongly recommended in the plan as part of the plan and as part of the zoning recommendations.
Thank you. Any further? Paul, come up.
Paul McCann, Summers Avenue. I had kind of two questions, but, oh, sorry about that. So the housing needs, when you determine the housing needs, and I hear different figures, but I saw something where I read where we have about 715 units in development process. I don't know if they broke ground or what we're at there, but there's 715, and I know personally I had a unit in Baker Avenue, has a storage building, I call them mini storage, but self-storage units over on Baker Avenue. It's kind of behind Nelson's Hardware, next to the Vibrant Roots and the Montana Spa. There's a bunch of storage units there. At any rate, they're going to build multifamily on that lot. They're tearing them down, and that's what the owner told me and asked me to leave. So I guess that's going to be probably another 30 units. So we have quite a few units already in the pipeline. And so when you say the need for the community, does that include that 715 plus, this process? Alan? I'm sorry.
All right, Alan's going to answer this.
Yeah.
Take it away. Alan, can you turn your mic on, please?
Alan, we can't hear you. You said no one ever. So when we did the housing element, we got an actual physical count of units that are actually built on the ground, right? Not ones that are entitled, ones that are on the ground. So there's, give or take, there's 5,700 built housing units. And if you look at what the state has told us, they've said 7,776.
Additional 2,100.
Right. So who's counting? If you subtract that number, you get 2,076 left over. So that 2,076 does not, if you added that 700 units, that would subtract off of that 2,076. If you were going to play the numbers game, right? I'm giving you the numbers game because, that's all I have. But that 5,700 units does not include you. It includes units that are being constructed, like at the Whitefish Community Corridor, where those are being built, but the ones that were still on paper at the time that I counted them were not included. So, give or take, those additional units would be counted into that 2,076.
Does that make sense? So you've got about the 2,100 units needed. If 700 units come online, you could make the argument, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, there's about 1,400 units still to go, give or take.
Right. The only hesitance I have is that that 750 units, I would have to subtract out whatever was being built but not occupied yet at the community corridor, if you guys know what I'm talking about. But all those on-paper units wouldn't be counted. And I think it was 150 or 200, something like that. So I think, now I'm just guessing, maybe we're talking about 500 units, I think, are entitled, but they haven't been built. So we're not talking about on-paper units. It's for me, right, to meet this, it's a physical counting. And what's happening is after I did that land use inventory, when Lauren is nice enough every quarter to give me a spreadsheet of all of the certificates of occupancy, and I keep on top of that spreadsheet, so I know relatively accurately how many actual living units we have in Whitefish. So if the state said, hey, city, you're not doing X, Y, Z, I can say, not only are your counts wrong, I can show you where those units are.
We know you're waiting for that, Alan. Tour of Whitefish. All right, thank you, Paul.
Oh, can I have one more question?
Well, if it's very short, we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, but
Well, the question
sure.
is on the zoning, I guess it's just more of a zoning question. So does multifamily or residential, however, is it allowed in all zonings then, if I understand it correctly? And the reason why I bring that up is the area where they're actually tearing down the storage units to put multifamily on Baker Avenue, I thought, well, that'd be a perfect location for a professional office building or something. And here, and people need places to work, and that's another function of the whole affordability aspect of having jobs. And so it's kind of sad to see that right on a busy street, multifamily is going to be placed where it's perfect for professional offices. And I used to develop professional offices, so I'm kind of sensitive to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thomas, do you want to answer multifamily?
I think I might look to Alan and Dave, but I think that right now in all of your zoning designations, you allow for single family and duplex. Not all of them allow for multifamily, but I think that MLUPA requires that all commercial zones, at least heavy commercial zones, will allow for multifamily development. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Currently, the state, in one of their more recent bills in the legislature required us to allow multifamily and mixed use in all of our commercial zones. And so our B1, our B2, our B3 zones, as well as some of our other commercial zones, all allow multifamily and mixed use. On Baker Avenue, this really has nothing to do with the growth policy in particular, but if it's at the far south end of Baker, that property is probably zoned heavy industrial, which would not allow multifamily. So if the developer wants to do multifamily, he's going to probably have to come in for some sort of zone change and maybe a growth policy amendment, but I'm not aware of that project specifically.
All right, any further questions? Mary, come on up, and Jamie behind. Thank you.
I have a few questions, so I would like to hear a little bit more of an detailed background to the question Richard asked about by right, and a little more understanding. If I was trying to explain that to someone who called our office, I couldn't do it right now. I haven't looked at it really closely, so if there's a way to explain that a little bit more clearly. Second question is, on the 3 areas, excuse me, that were identified as currently vacant properties that are targeted for future higher density development. I understand that there were, again, going back to this dots on a map, there were dots that were placed by the public that I understand guided to somewhat what areas you chose. And I question whether or not that's the best way to do that, but I would like to know, beyond that, how were those sites looked at in terms of their environmental integrity? I know at least one of those sites has a lot of wetland and stream areas, high groundwater issues. How was that looked at and integrated? How was it looked at in terms of, do we have the transportation capacity? And is that kind of shifting our transportation? How does that shift? In the current transportation plan, there are priorities. Does that have to be gone back and looked at? How does it affect Highway 93? What analysis went in besides here, empty spots, we can build development? What else went into that analysis?
Thanks. So when we initially looked at the mapping and started doing some of the land use analysis, we actually identified a few sites that we thought were appropriate for infill development. And so that was based on GIS mapping and us overlaying certainly the fact that those lands were vacant, us overlaying adjacent land uses, us overlaying the transportation network, infrastructure network, et cetera. So those were initially our recommendations. We threw them out to the community to ask for input, whether the community thought they were good recommendations based on our analysis. We thought they were good recommendations based upon our review of the transportation plan and future upgrades. We thought they were logical locations for future densification and growth. When we took those to the community, we asked for input, whether they thought they were good locations, and if so, to prioritize them. The community was generally supportive of the 3 locations that you saw, and so that's what we presented tonight.
Can you answer about any environmental factors that you may have looked at?
We do know that there is, at least on one of the properties, there is a stream that goes through there, and our recommendation is, of course, for setback, strong environmental protection, stream setbacks for that area, but that it could be developed around that and utilize that as actually a landscape and environmental amenity. So that was our recommendation.
And then the first part of her question about Richard asking by right, that may be something that we have to hash out and give a more in-depth answer later, but if you want to take a shot, go ahead now,
I could take a
please.
stab, and then
Thank you.
certainly Dave, Allen, or others, you all may actually be able to answer this as well as me, but by right zoning, just so that everybody is clear, is simply zoning that includes permitted uses within the zoning ordinance. So these are uses that are permitted, so they are by right pursuant to the ordinance. They don't have a conditional use component to them. They don't have additional conditions, and they don't have additional criteria. They're permitted uses. For example, single-family residential use or a duplex in a residential zone is a by right use. You meet the lot size, you meet the lot setbacks, it is a by right use. You can go in and essentially get your building permit. That is the recommendation by MLUPA, is that more of your uses move to by right. With that, that is the reason our recommendation is additional development standards be incorporated into the ordinance so that you are protected in ways that you probably have protected yourself in the past with conditional use criteria when a conditional use has been brought before the Planning Commission. So incorporating those somewhat standard development standards, those typical development standards in the zoning ordinance would start to get you to close to maybe the same place you get when you have a conditional use permit when you all provide conditions and criteria. So that's the difference between by right and conditional uses. But again, MLUPA is pushing you to by right.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you for asking that question, Mary. And I will ask just for a little bit of elaboration, because that was my question as well. With regard to the fact that we don't have architectural review anymore, I had this idea of a pattern book, which would be standards outlined in advance that would pave the way for developers to go ahead and build within the constraints of the pattern book by right. And if there is no architectural review and therefore probably no ability to implement a pattern book, then that would be put into the zoning. So specifically setbacks, parking minimums, building height, and other factors. But when it comes to getting creative and density, I guess I wanted a little bit more elaboration on how far one could go by right, and if you guys are willing to be more flexible in terms of building more density. And yeah, I guess that's my question, if that's even a question. Thanks for asking that question, Mary.
Go ahead. Thank you.
I can take a stab at this. So I don't think that MLUPA is going to allow you to go as far as you have gone in the past regarding the ARC and some of their design standards in terms of building materials and colors and things like that. I think that our recommendation as you think about development standards really aren't design focused per se, allow that flexibility for the development community, but to really think about building pattern, building form, kind of layout, articulation, kind of just setting a basic set of standards in place is probably a good way to think about development standards. But again, allowing design, color, material flexibility is probably best left to the developer. And I don't think that MLUPA would actually allow for those to be incorporated into the code at this point.
Thank you. Any further questions from the community? All right, come on up.
Dick Solner, Whitefish. After listening to this, excuse me, I'm just wondering if we're going to jump ourselves too far ahead with all the homes if we haven't fixed our transportation. I mean, right now you've got such a transportation problem. And what I'm just wondering, I hear all about people that want to ride bikes and stuff. Is there anybody in here tonight that walked or rode a bike to this meeting? Well, good. I wouldn't think there's that many. You take a big chance out there in the dark. But anyway, I would like to see something. If we have all these houses put in, are our roads that we have now going to be able to? What's the traffic going to look like in the middle of the day?
Thank you. We're going to let the consultant speak to how they use the transportation plan draft to develop this land use that they're working on. I think that's the best way to handle that, so that's a question for them, and he can answer it.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
So yeah, just as a follow-up, so we did look at the transit plan where recommendations for improvements are made, and so the areas for growth were recommended, and based upon that, those opportunities for improved infrastructure. I would also say that as part of a higher density development pattern in these areas, our recommendation would be the strong connections for bike paths, separated paths. That is important. We've talked to a number of people about that, kind of those last mile connections. So not just, say, A, B, and C, sites A, B, and C having strong pedestrian and bike connectivity, but making sure that those areas are well connected to the downtown so that people can get there in a perfect world on a bike path, on a separated bike path, separated bike ped path, so they can get to downtown safely. In an ideal world, eliminating some of the traffic on 93, right? A number of components have to come together: infrastructure, transit infrastructure, and certainly the densification of these areas. But they are all being recommended as part of the growth policy, and so in a perfect world, they would align, and CIP dollars would be directed toward those.
Thank you. Any further questions for CZB? All right, and thank you guys for your questions. This is kind of the culmination of so many different elements where we keep saying, wait until the land use, wait until this, and so now we're finally here. And there are still things where we're saying, well, that depends on how this gets changed. So, giant document. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, guys. And thank you, community, for your questions tonight. And know that your questions will filter into our discussion on February 4th and how we look at this land use plan, along with the high school students' presentations. That was great. All right, go ahead, Alan. Can you, is it on? Thank you.
If you didn't already hear this, I want to say it again. This Tuesday, not Monday, because MLK Day is on Monday. This Tuesday is our city council meeting. And if you haven't been on the website starting yesterday, if you go on the city website, and I can post it on the engagement site, if you go to our agendas, linked on our agenda is the first compiled draft of the community plan that you can see. So if you haven't seen it yet, you can look at all what right now is 147 pages of it, and that we are presenting that plan. So it's all the background, the setting, the demographics, the history, and economic development, environment, natural resources, hazards, and public facilities. All that is going to the council this Tuesday, really for an information gathering, so we can kind of let them know the process and what the outstanding issues were. But if you haven't seen the entire compiled draft, that's now available. Go to the agenda for the council and you can see it.
And then quickly, can you tell people where they can still submit public comment for land use, and then where they can also read current public comment?
Sure. I mean, you can still submit it. You can still submit it through the Engage website. You can send it directly to me. You'll hate me if I spell my name right now. You could put on the website, there's a questions box. So there's multiple different ways that you can reach them. But you know, you will see, we hope, we've seen and are working with them right now on the final draft of the land use. They're going to refine it over the next couple of weeks, and you'll be seeing that within the next week to 10 days. So, you know, I apologize. In the early process, there's been a lot more time. We don't have that time anymore, so things are moving really quickly. But when it's released, if you're on the engagement site, you will get a notification and find out about it.
Thanks for getting us to us in a week, Alan. We'll expect it. Thank you.
I think you said the 25th, 26th, or something like that, wasn't it? I think. For your
10 or 11 days.
Something like that.
Okay, thank you. So look for that. So we'll wrap up this portion of our agenda tonight. Thank you guys for hanging in here with us. it was kind of an interesting way to run our regular meeting with this portion of the land use plan and the growth policy in it. So that's why it was a little interesting with public comment to begin and then this question answer session. So definitely come back on February 4th for the whole public comment and our discussion of land use plan. So thank you, consultants. You're free to go if you'd like. We don't want you to stay here for the rest of this, unless you want to. But thank you and have a safe flight. So we will head on now, and thank you, members of the public, for coming for this and then also staying with us through this process. We appreciate you. We'll move on now to our Planning Commission appointments. As this is our first meeting of the year, we always appoint chair and vice chair, and then this time we also have a Lake Shore Committee appointment. So we'll do that now and then adopt our rules of procedure. So the first item under our commission appointments is selecting a Planning Commission chair. So for all of these, we'll take nominations and a second, and then we will vote on that. All right. Do we have any nominations?
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Is there an opportunity to like discuss somewhere in there?
Yes, so after we have a nomination and a second, then we can discuss. If there are multiple nominations, then we'll take the nomination, the second, and discuss the first nominee and then the second nominee, and then we'll vote. Yeah, so.
I would nominate Whitney to retain her as chair.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to nominate Whitney Beckham for chair. Any further nominations? All right, so if there are no further nominations, we'll close the nominations for chair. And if anybody would like to speak to their nomination or their second, they can. And if there's any discussion, go ahead with that. All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor of Whitney Beckham for chair, raise your hand. Okay, all right. Did you get that, Bree? Thank you very much. I accept. Sure, I will. So next we will go to selection of Planning Commission Vice Chair. Do we have a nomination for Planning Commission Vice Chair?
As the Commission Vice Chair.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second for that? I'll second that. Any further nominations for Vice Chair?
I'd like to nominate Mike for my vice chair.
I'd like to second.
A motion and a second for Mike for vice chair. Any further nominations for vice chair? All right. Phil, would you like to speak to your nomination for Scott? You don't have to, but if you would like to, you can.
Well, I've seen Scott on this, on the planning board and other boards for a number of years now, and I really respect his insight and his research into all the different issues we've had to encounter. I think he'd be an excellent vice chair as such.
All right, and I will speak to that as well. I've worked with Scott for several years now, since we got merged Board of Adjustment, and it's been a pleasure, and he's very fair in his decision-making. I would trust him to run a meeting for us. We're absent, and I may be some, so I support that. And Scott, if you would like to speak, and then we'll give Mike and his nomination the same in just a moment.
I guess I'd just like to say that I've enjoyed my time on this board, despite all of the Sturm und Drang. I feel like I would serve in the neutral capacity that is required, and I would accept the nomination. Thank you.
All right, and Marty, would you like to speak to your, well, did anyone else want to speak for Scott? No one has to, but if they would like to. All right, Marty, would you like to speak to your nomination for Mike?
Yeah, I was very impressed at our last meeting how Mike launched in and felt like he had been on this board for years, when in fact it was his first meeting. I think he has a really great background in nonprofits and working on boards, and that really shone through for me. I was impressed by how he fit pretty seamlessly into the structure of the meeting, and also how he was very good about reading all of the different public comments and trying to incorporate as many of them as felt reasonable, and comments from all different areas. So, yeah.
Any further in favor of Mike?
So I just wanted to second kind of what Marty said, and I also appreciated Mike's attempt to look at the way that the last chapter, the housing chapter, was kind of organized, and how could we make the meeting run even more efficiently. We all know that our meetings take a lot of time, and I think that eye for how, when appropriate, we can make it more efficient and run a little bit quicker, because time is valuable. So I really appreciated that.
Thanks, Mallory. Mike, would you like to speak?
Yeah, very briefly. Thank you, Marty and Mallory, for the very nice words. Scott, you have a lot of experience on this. I think I'm just bringing somewhat of a new energy. I don't have a lot of the prior arguments that have gone amongst the process, and that's no fault of anyone's, believe me. It's been a arduous process, which I followed very closely. I think I'm prepared to do that. I also don't think this is a crucial decision, if I may. I mean, ideally, we have a chairperson who is going to be here. This is the limits of authority for the new position are running a meeting and directing the discussion in the absence of Whitney. So whatever's decided, fine. I think I'll do a good job if I do get picked. So all good.
All right. Any further discussion on vice chair?
I guess I'd just I'd echo what Mike just said, right? I mean, I agree with Marty and Mallory in terms of their kind of assessment of Mike's contribution so far. And I would have equal confidence in his ability as well. So I am willing to accept the decision of the board. Thank you.
We're so nice tonight. I love us. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a vote on this. So first we will vote all in favor of Scott Worster for vice chair. Raise your hand. Okay, so that's Phil Boland, myself, and Scott. Okay, all in favor or all not in favor of Scott Worster. I guess we'll do it that way. Okay, raise your hand. I know it is. I don't know how best to do that.
I promise not to take it personally.
I mean, but what if, so it's for, I was trying to make us have a fight because we're so nice. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so all in favor of Mike for vice chair, raise your hand. All right, so Mallory, Mike, and Marty, and Andy. All right, so Mike will be our new vice chair. Congratulations to both of you, and to myself. Thank you. All right, so now we'll move on to appointment of Planning Commission member to the Lake and Lakeshore Protection Committee, and we'll take nominations for this. If anybody needs a refresher on what this is, we can do that, but I think we've all kind of looked at it and have an idea. So I'll take nominations for that appointment.
Can I nominate Scott Worster for this? You expressed interest at the last meeting, I believe, didn't you?
I did.
All right, I'll second that for sure. Anyone else like to do this or want? Okay, so we're gonna
Additional responsibilities.
All right. So, Scott, if you accept all in favor of Scott being our Lakeshore Committee, raise your hand. All right, and he even raised his own hand. Perfect. All right, so unanimously, Scott will be our Lakeshore Protection Committee appointment. And so congratulations, Scott, on that. And now we will look at hopefully approving the Planning Commission rules of procedure. We've all looked at these, I'm guessing, since they were part of our agenda. Can I get a motion for this approval of these rules of procedure? And then after a second, we can discuss if there's anything that needs to be amended. Okay.
I just have a question in that, why was this raised now? You've been meeting as a commission for a long time, and all of a sudden this pops up. Was this mandated by MLUPA or by the state or whomever?
So Wendy will answer that.
Your title was changed like, I don't know, November 5th or something. And I think we just forgot to do it at your December meeting because you didn't meet in November. So this is just the next meeting. And the only thing we changed was Community Development Board to Planning Commission. So it's exactly the same as you've been operating for the past few years. So it's housekeeping.
All right, can I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Scott. I'll second. All right, thank you, Andy. Any discussion on these? They're the same, just a name change. All right, all in favor of adopting these rules of procedure for our Planning Commission with the name change, raise your hand. All right, unanimously, we will follow these rules of procedure. So now we will move on to unfinished business. I don't think we have any other than this growth policy. Just a little elephant. Public hearings, we already had one, but it says none. Good and welfare. Any matters from the board at this point? Okay. So matters from staff tonight. Do you guys have
Just a
anything?
reminder, the February 4th meeting, of course, you already talked about that. And then February 19th will be our regular meeting, and we do have agenda items for that. So.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for hanging in here with us. We've all signed up to do this. Thank you. Anyone who knows that they will not be here February 19th? Does it? Everybody thinks they will? Okay, so we should all be here. And I'm going to go ahead and ask February 4th. People think they'll be here, mostly. Okay.
Whitney?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I am getting back that evening after the meeting, unless it goes extraordinarily long.
I like the way you phrased that. Unfortunately, I'm getting back.
I still may be able to call in to the February 4th. Okay.
All right. So, and that is our growth policy meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Will all second. Thank you.
I'll second.
All right.
So soon?
Thank you. Okay.